There's something up here. I don't know. It's I've been asked that a lot. A lot of people wonder, you know, what's the secret, you know? One of the things I really believe, you know, has birthed all this music up here for many years is just the heritage in Ireland and Scotland. You know, people coming over, bringing instruments 200 years ago into these mountains of Kentucky, West Virginia, and southwestern part of Virginia, East Tennessee. This whole, you know, 100-mile region around here, you know, it's just unbelievable at the talent that's been here. And I got to say, I really believe that much of the time poverty breeds greatness. You know, when people are born, you know, to poor families, I think we reach down where there's music and where there's entertainment, and we entertain ourselves with what we have, and we get good at doing that.
Well, apples in the summertime, peaches in the fall. If I can't have the girl I want, I don't want one at all. I wish I was in Shady Grove in a rocking chair. If the blues would let me alone, I'd rock away from there. Shady Grove, my true love, Shady Grove, my darling. Shady Grove, my true love, I'm going back to Harlan. Some come here to fiddle and dance, some come here to tarry, some come here to fiddle and dance. I came here to marry. Used to have an old banjo, strings were made of twine. Only song I could sing is Trouble on My Mind. Shady Grove, my true love, Shady Grove, my darling. Shady Grove, my true love, I'm going back to Harlan.
The Appalachian Mountains extend for a total of 1,600 miles, stretching from Quebec, Canada, into northern Georgia and Alabama. Though it is the chief mountain system of eastern North America and the oldest range in the United States, the term Appalachia more readily brings to mind the 200-mile Cumberland Plateau, which links Kentucky, West Virginia, and eastern Tennessee. Much has come from this small part of the Appalachian Mountains. Its rich resources have been vital elements in this progressive nation. But it is the music which took root here that has become a truly distinct American gift and reached deeply into the four corners of the globe. All the while, the core has remained intact and pure, as many other forms of this beloved music have evolved and now engage untold millions. This wealth of Appalachia has touched the world, and in ways that not only reflected the culture, but indeed have changed it.
The Scotch Irish settlers who came to the Cumberland's area of the Appalachians in the mid-1700s brought with them the old world ballads and the music of their native Scotch Irish heritage. As these new Americans settled in and firmly established fresh societies along the frontier, new songs and tunes about the newly adopted homeland were composed, performed countless times, then began their journey in time to be passed down through generations of families and friends living in the same region. They were usually passed along by singing them at family gatherings and church functions. These were true mountain people, living far from the denser populations of cities and towns. Their music clearly depicted their lives in the hills and reflected the values and interests of a rural way of life in mountain country. Soon the music became known as mountain music or country music. Without question, it had its own unmistakable sound and style.
Death I come to take the soul, leave the body and leave it cold, to drop the flesh right off the frame. The earth and worms both have a claim. Oh, death, oh, death, won't you spare me over till another year? Won't you spare me over till another year? Thank you.
Well, I think this part of the country, maybe some of the people might be maybe raised poor, and that kind of people knows what's going on, and a lot more than if a lot of people always what you might say corn-fed, you know, and don't know what hard times and all is, and people, you know, could write songs about hard times and things like that. And then it's just some way that the people from this part of the country, Kentucky and Virginia and West Virginia and around Tennessee, it just comes natural to them, I reckon. And it's just, I mean, when you hear people from this part of the country, it's natural. There's no put on about it, and I think that's it.
The mountain folks and their music were shielded from outside influences by the sheer geography of the region. The Appalachian Mountains became a historical borderland where wilderness and civilization met to form America's first and longest-lived frontier. It was in these remote, isolated mountain communities that the song stayed unadulterated until the end of the 19th century. And up to that time, the fiddle was the primary instrument for playing the tunes and for accompanying the traditional songs. But change was in the wind. The growth of this new nation took flight as the Civil War came to a close and the country was eager to press on to new opportunities. Railroads began to open the region as industry sought the immense coal reserves hidden deep in the mountains. The railroad worked magic. Music underpinned its tracks, bringing vaudeville, minstrel, and medicine show troupes. We have even been rewarded by music growing directly out of the railroad culture itself, which drew much of its feel and style from the accompanying African heritage. It was often the railroad workers themselves, with a variety of work songs reflecting their African heritage, who brought new ideas to the settlers' original music. The native fiddle of the English, Scotch, and Irish settlers was joined by the banjo of African origin. These examples of the African hallam became the American five-string banjo. The hallam originally had 3 long strings and a short string. The body was actually made from a gourd, just like the one you find in your garden. It can be seen here in this painting called The Old Plantation. It was done sometime between 1777 and 1800. Then another string was added to create the American five-string banjo. The mountain musicians loved this new sound and were eager to learn.
Only blacks in Appalachia continued to play the banjo after the banjo became the symbol, the logo of the minstrel. The southern blacks resented it and stopped playing the banjo. But the blacks in Appalachia didn't get out to minstrels often enough to feel this shame. So they continued to play the banjo. And also, many Appalachian white banjo pickers learned from blacks, including Doc Boggs.
Oh, I've heard about Doc.
Doc himself told me, he's a distant relative, he told me that he learned to play a banjo by following black railroad crew building the railroads in Wise County to exploit the coal. Doc was a little boy, about 12 years old. He'd follow along after them when they had little rest spells. He'd put a banjo over in the hand of a man, let him pick the banjo, and Doc would watch how he was doing it. So Doc is, I guess, our best Appalachian blues man.
Soon the simple fiddle tunes that had been brought to the hills took on a whole new sound. A good example is the old mountain tune, Old Joe Clark. After the rail lines were built, many of the African American laborers remained in the area to work the coal mines. They established communities, schools, and churches, and in doing so, they brought another kind of music to these mountains, the spiritual. It was in the Breedings Creek Colored School in 1911 that this spiritual was first heard and recorded.
Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm gonna send thee one by one. One was the itty bitty baby born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm gonna send thee two by two. Two was Paul and Silas. One was the itty bitty baby born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm gonna send thee three by three. Three were the Hebrew children. Two was Paul and Silas. One was the itty bitty baby born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. How shall I send thee? I'm gonna send thee four by four. Four was the four that stood at the door. Three were the Hebrew children. Two was Paul and Silas. One was the itty bitty baby born in Bethlehem.
The history of these spirituals dates back to a time when many of the Scotch Irish ballads were developed. Go Down Moses was penned by a black congregation in the British Isles in 1784, and later revised as a musical tribute to Harriet Tubman for her heroic efforts establishing the Underground Railroad for slaves during the Civil War. And it was in the despair of slavery that Sarah Hannah Shepard wrote this song in 1847.
Sweet chariot,
Over 28,000 Kentucky blacks fought for the Union in the Civil War. They gained freedom for themselves, their wives, and children, and from this effort there arose a joyful sound.
I want to be ready, I want to be ready, I want to be ready to walk in Jerusalem just like John. I want to be ready, I want to be ready, I want to be ready to walk in Jerusalem, singing, Jerusalem, shouting, Jerusalem, just like John. Come and sisters,
Now all the pieces were in place. A new musical explosion was set to come out of these hills and valleys. A sound that would change the musical world forever.
everybody sing. See the baby lying in a manger on that great morning. See him in the temple talking with the elders and all that is wisdom. Marching through Jerusalem over palm branches with pomp and splendor. In the garden, praying to his Father in deepest sorrow. Led before Pilate, then they crucified him. But he rose on Easter. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. He died to save us, and he lives forever. Amen. Oh, oh, amen. Oh, oh, amen. Oh, oh,
This is a world of trouble.
From the early 1700s in Scotland and Ireland, they brought the music.
I see. But in my depths of sorrow, O Lord, I look to Thee.
After the Civil War, the music began to change and took on added dimensions.